Yes, so welcome back everybody. So for the last few weeks, we've been looking at the figure of Padmasabhava. We've heard about the mythic figure, a bit about some of the mythic stories which he was involved in. We've had some personal experiences from an Indian member about his connection to the figure. And Sadaraj gave a great talk last week talking about a couple of instances of him being in deep connection with Padmasabhava. So doing something slightly different this week. And I'm going to be talking about one particular teaching, whereas that is say one teaching is about a page and a half, so it's a bit more than one teaching. But this is a teaching on faith, confidence and trust in the Dharma. And I first heard this quite a few years ago, and it inspired me from day one. So it's very close to my heart, and I've been reflecting on it quite a bit over the last few weeks. It's been very, very helpful. I've got quite a lot to say, so I might have to cull some of that. Otherwise, we're not going to get home before 1:30. Yeah, so I'm going to be saying quite a bit about how my experience of faith, or the term Shraddha is one I'm going to use, relates to this talk. So it's going to be rather Yashodhaka centric, but hopefully it will illuminate the lines from the text in relation to my own life. And this particular text was given from Padmasabhava to his disciple and consort Yeshe Tsogyal. So he's basically advising his consort Yeshe Tsogyal on faith. And to give myself a safety net, yesterday I asked Padmasabhava for his blessing as I was giving this talk, and had quite a moving experience. So I appear to be getting the nod. So whether that transpires in the form of a good talk, who knows? Anyway, I had an experience of being blessed by Padmasabhava. So make of that what you will. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to read the text, which will take about 3 or 4 minutes, and then I'll go into some of the text line by, well, there's not the full line by line treatment of the text, but some of the lines which have a resonance for me, I will talk about, and hopefully we'll have about 15 minutes at the end to discuss the kind of things which have been raised, which may mean I have to cut out some of what I'm going to say, never mind. So this is the text, and I've got 15 copies here. It's not enough for everybody, but at the end of the evening, if you really like it, then please come and take one of the copies away. So Master Padma said, this is Padmasabhava, Tsogyal, to escape samsaric existence, you must have faith in the path of liberation. That is to say, faith arises through causes and conditions, and not on its own. Faith arises when causes and conditions coincide, and you take impermanence to heart. Faith arises when remembering cause and effect. Faith arises when reading the profound sutras and tantras. Faith arises when associating with faithful companions. Faith arises when following a master and spiritual teacher. Faith arises when being in painful difficulties. Faith arises when making offerings at a special shrine. Faith arises when encountering profound behavior. Faith arises when hearing the life examples of the lineage masters. Faith arises when listening to the Vajra songs of realization. Faith arises when seeing the suffering of another being. Faith arises when reading the sacred teachings of your inclination. Faith arises when noticing the qualities of sublime beings. Faith arises when receiving the blessings of your master. It is my advice to never be apart from the causes for faith to arise. Again, Master Padma said, Tsogyal, if you have faith in your heart, you must make it endure. If you don't, you must make it arise. To lack faith is like trying to make charcoal white. You are severed from the virtues of the path of liberation. To lack faith is like being a gemstone at the bottom of the ocean. You are enmeshed in the depths of samsaric existence. To lack faith is like being in a boat without oars. You cannot cross the sea. To lack faith is like sowing grains in rigid and uncultivated, though fertile soil. Not a single virtue survives. To lack faith is like a seed that has been scorched by fire. The sprouts of enlightenment do not grow. To lack faith is like traveling through fearful places without an escort. You won't overcome the enemy of disturbing emotions. To lack faith is like being a vagrant landing in jail. You won't escape the lower realms. To lack faith is like an armless man trying to climb a rock. You fall into the abyss of the 6 classes of beings. To lack faith is like a deer caught by the hunter. You will be executed by the Lord of Death. To lack faith is like a blind man staring at a shrine. You don't see the object of knowledge. To lack faith is like an idiot arriving on an island of pure gold. You don't know what you have found. People without faith cannot possibly attain liberation or enlightenment. Again, Master Padma said, Tsogyal, for attaining enlightenment, to have faith is to complete half the practice of the Dharma. Faith is like a fertile field. Any instruction planted will grow. Faith is like a wish-fulfilling jewel. It yields the blessings to accomplish whatever one pursues. Faith is like a world ruler. It upholds the kingdom of the Dharma. Faith is like a bridge or a boat. It allows you to cross the ocean of samsara. Faith is like a rope dangling into an abyss. It pulls you out of the lower realms. Faith is like a healing physician. It eliminates the chronic disease of the 5 poisons. Faith is like a powerful escort. It leads you safely through the perils of samsara. Faith is like a protective defender. It saves you from the treacherous 4 maras. Faith is like the waxing moon. It lets virtues increase further and further. Faith is like a bribe to dodge imprisonment. It tricks the demonic lord of death. Faith is like an ascending pathway. It leads you to the elevated city. Faith is like an inexhaustible treasure mine. It provides for all needs and wants. Faith is like a man's hands. It gathers the roots of virtue. Faith is like a swift-footed steed. It carries you to the point of liberation. Faith is like an elephant who can carry a huge load. It leads you higher and higher. Faith is like a sparkling fountainhead. It manifests innate wakefulness. Once faith has dawned from deep within you, all virtuous qualities arrive in a mountainous heap. So he's making quite a strong case for faith there, isn't he? He's saying what is good and what's not so good when it's not there. And I'm just remembering that earlier on, just for quite a bit of today, I've been really moved at the prospect of giving this talk. So clearly it's something very close to my heart. I am a faith type. So this is one of the reasons why I've been giving this talk, is that faith is something that really has a strong resonance for me. So just saying a few things here which really highlight the primary importance of faith or Shraddha in the Dharma life, and taking a few of these lines together. I'm not going to elucidate them. I think they have a certain clarity. And it says, Tsogyal, to escape samsaric existence, you must have faith in the path of liberation. That is to say, faith arises through causes and conditions and not on its own. It is my advice to never be apart from the causes for faith to arise. Tsogyal, if you have faith in your heart, you must make it endure. If you don't, you must make it arise. People without faith cannot possibly attain liberation or enlightenment. Tsogyal, for attaining enlightenment, to have faith is to complete half the practice of the Dharma. So I'm not going to really say anything about it. I think they speak for themselves as really highlighting the absolute importance of confidence and trust in the Dharma. Without that, you can't make significant progress. But I think I need to start by trying to give an idea about what is actually meant by Shraddha, faith. The word is used, faith, here, which may not be to everybody's taste. So yeah, so what is it? So as I said, it's a British translation or an English translation of the word Shraddha. So it's not an intellectual thing. It's more of an emotional thing. It's a positive emotion that motivates you to practice the Dharma. It's kind of a deep intuition. It's not purely blind faith. Although I have to say that to some degree, all faith is a little bit blind because you don't know quite what you're committing yourself to. You don't quite know where's at the far end, but you have an intuition that there's something to go for, there's something to practice the Dharma for. And it's most likely going to start off in some sort of germinal form of openness and receptivity to the Dharma, to the teachings and practices. But as we continue to practice, then our strength of confidence, if we continue, will tend to grow, and we will start to have a genuine confidence and trust in the three jewels, informed by our own experience. And Sangharakshita, Bhante, he spoke of Shraddha, and I think I'm not doing him a disservice here. He said as being the response of what is highest in us to what is highest in the universe. So that's a really evocative phrase. Shraddha is the response of what is highest in us to what is highest in the universe. So it has sort of different dimensions. It has dimensions of conviction, conviction in the truth of the Dharma, including the law of karma, which is vital. And it has a kind of a lucidity, a kind of a clarity. It delivers a kind of clarity about what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. Some things will be very much in line with the Dharma, and some things won't. So it's a kind of something which orders our life in some way. It gives it a kind of order out of the chaos. And it's a kind of a confidence in our own power to attain what is advertised in the Dharma, that is realizing good qualities and profound qualities. And along with that comes some form of desire and aspiration for these qualities. So it's just a strong response to what the Dharma seems to be able to deliver, combined with a clarity and a confidence. So it has these different dimensions to it. And it's best to think of it as Shraddha, our faith, is not something that one has once and for all, but it will tend to grow with time. And it's something which we may be able to contact at certain times, and other times are a little bit more distant from it. So it's not something which we so much have as something which we contact. So when Padmasabhava was talking about putting in conditions for faith to arise, this is important because sometimes we will be in contact with confidence, and sometimes you won't. So you need to put conditions in place which will help us to contact this sense of confidence. And we need to distinguish between faith and devotion. So they aren't quite the same thing. Faith may be expressed in devotion, but it may be expressed in other ways. And interestingly, an ex-chair of the College of Public Preceptors, a kind of one of the higher bodies of our movement. He said he didn't have a devotional bone in his body, and he'd been ordained for many, many years, probably 40 years. And he didn't like rituals, but he knew they were good for him. So even if you're very strongly committed to Dharma and have got strong Shraddha, strong faith, you may not be a devotional bent. So it's not necessarily an issue. But yeah, so we don't need to equate faith and devotion. The one may be an expression of the other. And one thing to mention is that it has been said, and this is quite an interesting thought, that we can think of Shraddha, this confidence in the Dharma, confidence that there is something to aim for, can be seen as a kind of a preliminary or a prefiguration of wisdom. So it's like, you could say it's wisdom in its most germinal form. So that's quite an interesting perspective, that for the gaining of wisdom, it sort of requires a sense of Shraddha. And just looking at things a little bit more broadly, we got what we might understand as faith or Shraddha in the Buddhist context. But if we look at Bante's phrase about being the response of what's highest in us to what's highest in the universe, I think we can assume that it's not just Buddhists who have something like Shraddha. So it's kind of this emotional response, which we may interpret based on a framework which makes sense to us. And if we're a Buddhist, then we will make sense of any sense of confidence in the universe, if you like, in Buddhist terms. We're going to practice the Dharma. But something like, well, there is faith in all traditions, and it's probably not a million miles away from what we might think of as Shraddha in Buddhism. So I don't think you have to be a committed Buddhist to have something like Shraddha. And similarly, one doesn't have to be a practicing Buddhist or practicing anything to have experience of emotions which seem to be in this general area. And I had an experience. I still do play a lot of music, but once I was playing in an orchestra, and we were playing. Don't know if anybody who knows Mahler's Second Symphony. Then it was an amazing piece of music with an absolutely cataclysmic ending, and I just had the strongest emotional feeling of my life, I can say, on a number of occasions while we practiced it and later gave a performance of this piece. And years later, and I didn't know what was going on at the time, I knew something was going on. It's clearly, I did not understand this. I did not understand something. There was more to life than I knew, which sounds a little bit like Shraddha. But the emotion, I had no context for understanding. But or a bit later, once I started engaging with the Dharma, I had some sort of framework to hang this particular experience on. So it's something which can come upon us probably at any time. A strong emotion. We don't have to necessarily be practicing anything, but if we're sufficiently open, then maybe it can come an experience like this and come upon us at any time. This is just me thinking out loud. So at the time when I had this particular experience, I was an engineer, quite a rational person, but I did play music. So being of a more rational or scientific bent doesn't mean that we're divorced from the capacity to have Shraddha. I certainly wasn't, even though I lived my life in quite a rational kind of way. Yes, so now getting on to talking about how does faith arise, and lines that really struck me as I was preparing for this talk particularly was, faith arises when being in painful difficulties, And faith arises when causes and conditions coincide and you take impermanence to heart. And what this resonates for me is that in the late 1990s, both my parents passed away. I was in my late 30s, and a year later, I had just a failed brief romance. And at that point, I was sort of carved open. I was now on a spiritual quest with quite a lot of dedication, which basically led me to the Dharma. So what I'm really seeing from this is that having had strong experiences of impermanence, somehow this provoked a spiritual quest, some sort of openness, and indeed some sort of confidence there was something to aim for. And it's just a case of me finding a way towards that. And it was the Dharma which spoke to me very strongly. In a hotel room in Mexico, of all places, but that's another story for another time. Yes, so taking impermanence to heart and having painful difficulties definitely propelled me on the spiritual quest in my late 30s. And also remember story of a friend of mine, his Finnish friend Sangadaka, who used to live here, and he was propelled on a spiritual quest when he was very unfortunately in a boating accident with some young friends of his, and one of the guys passed away, and that propelled him on the spiritual quest. So again, painful difficulties and impermanence is not something just which propelled me on a quest, other people as well. And other verses, other lines which really struck me very strongly is, faith arises when associating with faithful companions, and faith arises in following a teacher, a master and a spiritual teacher. So in my early days of being in contact with the movement, I was going to Manchester Buddhist Centre, and in a way I was meeting, you could say, faithful companions for the first time, and I was introduced to the teachings of Bhante Sangharakshita, and I found them very, very clear and inspiring, and I got a very strong sense of the faith of Bhante. Somehow his confidence in the Dharma seemed to be absolutely at the very highest level, and this struck me really strongly. And it seems to me, at least based on my reflections, that having faithful companions and being willing to follow a spiritual teacher are absolutely important in a growth of confidence, my own confidence in the Dharma, the Buddha and the Sangha, to the extent that about a year and a half later, I left my old job and came here to Cambridge to work in a Buddhist gift-ware business, which I did for 12 years before it went under. And along with that, it's often said that going for refuge, which is kind of like an expression of Shraddha, an expression of faith, a natural expression of Shraddha and faith, is to follow the practices, to be engaged with the Sangha. It's said that this going for refuge is said to be caught rather than taught. I think we can probably say the same for Shraddha, for faith, that we tend to catch it from other people who embody it to a greater degree than we do. And this rings very true for me in my own experience, having associated with faithful companions and having a master and spiritual teacher who had a very profound faith. And there's another experience I had, which I would say was very much in the area of faith. And the relevant line from the text here is, faith arises when hearing the life examples of the lineage masters. Going back about, I can't remember how many years, more than 10 years, maybe 15 years or more, and Sangharakshita, he must have been in his about 80 at the time, and he came to Cambridge to deliver a question and answer section, question and answer session, and I was really very, very impressed, motivated, inspired by his presence, and I had a very strong, really delightful experience. And the thought which came was that Bhante is the real deal. He's really practicing the Dharma in a way which I hadn't encountered before, and it seems to me that this sort of promoted my own sense of confidence in him and ultimately in myself to a new level. So seeing the life example of a master, that I would regard Bhante as a master, seemed to have a very strong effect in my own connection to confidence. And another line which struck me really strongly from this text is, to have faith is to complete half the practice of the Dharma. And well, all I wanted to say about this, it's like, at least if my experience is anything to go by, if one's really in contact with faith, then you're going to practice the Dharma. It's not a chore, it's just what you're going to do. So you've already got on the cushion, and if you like, so the second half is to do it, but you've already got there. So it seems to me that faith basically gets you there, then you just got to do it. So in that sense, maybe think of it as being half the practice of the Dharma, because without faith, we're not going to get on the cushion very often. Do I really want to do it? It's not a case of whether you want to do it. You're doing it. You know you're going to do it. There's a motivation. One has a confidence in the Dharma. And there's another nice line. Faith is like a world ruler. It upholds the kingdom of the Dharma. And in relation to my own life, what this seemed to resonate was I was living and working in the Northwest, and I was working in defence. I was working in the military aviation industry, and there was just one point where I just had to leave. There's no way I could continue helping to build machines of destruction, however pretty they looked when they were flying in the sky. So basically it looked like my confidence and faith in the Dharma had risen to the extent that the kingdom of the Dharma need to be upheld to a greater degree than it was being upheld at that time. And I needed to leave my old job, my old way of living, and move to live and work in the Sangha here in Cambridge. And another upholding of the kingdom of the Dharma, to me, is to do with Sangharakshita founding a thriving movement, in the way upholding the kingdom of the Dharma within Triratna, and possibly somewhat outside as well. And no doubt that this thriving the kingdom of the Dharma in our movement is to some degree based on Bhante's explication of the Dharma, but without his strong faith, I don't believe it would have survived. So I've got a very strong sense that this upholding of the kingdom of the Dharma in the movement, founding a thriving movement worldwide, is a lot to do with Sangharakshita's profound and deep faith in the Dharma, upholding the kingdom of the Dharma as a result. Another line I like is, faith is like a rope dangling into an abyss. It pulls you out of the lower realms. And what this spoke to me was that talking in terms of the realms, this is very Yashodhaka centric, and you've probably got the idea by now. When I was before being a Buddhist, I had a let's put it bluntly, I was a rubbish lover, so I didn't have good relationships with women. But I had a lot of craving, so I was basically I was a hungry ghost, to use the Buddhist language. Buddhist gloss is like I was a hungry ghost. But having sort of got confidence in the Dharma, that went. It wasn't a hungry ghost anymore. Life was just so much easier. It was a great deal better. And one thing which also used to afflict me every now and again was I'd have sort of thinking about, is death the end of everything? And if part of me said, well, maybe, I would go into a deep funk for anything from 10 minutes to a week. So I was really in quite a really negative state of mind. Pretty soon after I encountered the Dharma, that went, never ever to come back. So it really does seem like I was the faith in the Dharma was like a rope dangling into an abyss. I was pulled out of the lower realms. What am I going to cut out? I'll cut out the bit I wanted to say, so we'll cut that out. That was a bit about me having fantastic retreat experiences. So you maybe you don't want to hear about that, which were propelled by faith. That's enough. I've covered that. The text also talks about lack of faith. To lack faith is like trying to make charcoal white. You are severed from the virtues of the path of liberation. And to lack faith is like a seed that has been scorched by fire. The sprouts of enlightenment don't grow. Now, it seems like there's always been two conundrums for me about where my practice didn't develop. It developed in some ways, but there's a few areas where it didn't develop. One was in the difficult area of daily mindfulness practice. It just seemed it was really difficult for it to really fire. And I sort of realized that even though I've spent time practicing it, it didn't really manifest very well. I realized I didn't actually have much faith that I could do daily mindfulness, that this lack of faith in myself was getting in the way of this particular quality thriving in me. So that made a great deal of sense to me. Book gets some sense about why this particular quality, which I've been trying to develop in 20 years with little success, was a lot to do with a lack of faith in my ability to do so. And the other area where things were a bit anomalous, I couldn't quite understand what was going on, was in relation to my yidam. Yidam is a mythic figure that one gets a kind of initiation to at ordination, and I was given the figure of Avalokiteshvara, and I've just been really flaky with my doing the meditation practice for years and years and years. Something was getting in the way. I can see now that it was something to do with a lack of faith in this figure, and going a bit further, I realised that I hadn't left completely behind some of my Christian conditioning. Part of me saw Avalokiteshvara as God. I didn't believe in God, so part of me didn't believe in my yidam. So this was quite a useful bit of understanding that there was a lack of faith due to my Christian upbringing. Fortunately, that has been got over that now, and I'm now on very good terms with Avalokiteshvara. We're talking most days. Yes, so not having faith can get in the way of our practice unfolding as it might. And yeah, we're going to be able to have 15 minutes for discussion in groups. But just my parting shot is that one of Padmasabhava's phrases is, if you have faith in your heart, you must make it endure. And I was reflecting, well, what has really helped whatever faith has arisen in me to endure has been a lot to do with the imagination. The Dharma has basically sparked off my imagination. It's provoked my writing of music. It's provoked some poetry in the past. And it's sparked off my imagination in terms of imagining, well, what could life be like if one really pursued the path of the Dharma, not necessarily to its end, but at least making significant progress. It has sparked off my imagination. So that's really one thing that's been really helped. My imagination has been brought alive by Dharma practice. But also, really importantly, in this general area, is that I think from pretty much day one, I've found meditation and ethics beautiful. So I don't have to, in a sense, need to have a purpose for practicing ethics or meditation, because they're beautiful in their own right. They have an aesthetic quality, which for me, I can't deny. So I'm just going to do it anyway. I'm always going to sit down and meditate. Well, in fact, here's a confession, I lie down and meditate. I don't get up to meditate in the morning. I'm already lying in bed and meditating. One day I'll learn how to get up and meditate, but anyway, I'm not quite got there yet. But anyway, but I find meditation and ethics beautiful. So that has really helped my path to unfold to some degree.